to take green space away under the guise of preserving open space. It's like, 1984 Orwellian doublespeak. Yes, Marlena.
What is remind us again what exactly ITA stands for?
ITA stands for Interfacility Traffic Area, which is what they're calling this package of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 major initiatives clustered around the municipal center, which is why they wanted to move City Hall, to free up the land so they could build mixed-use, Colonial Williamsburg-like residential development attainable for city workers to have a campus environment where the municipal center is today.
What if the city workers don't want to move there?
Good question. Good question.
Does John Moss want to leave his house?
Well, I don't know the answer to that yet because none of those questions have been asked because no one's aware of this. But here's what I will tell you. After this meeting on Tuesday night, Diana and I and Teresa, we went over to Stan's Delicatessen, which is a local first responder open across from the courthouse, right in the same area. And there's a sign on the door that says there's a 20% discount for any city worker if you show your ID, because it's adjacent to the municipal center. When this report talks about building attainable living for city workers, my guess is you're going to be talking about some type of subsidy or benefit for city workers to buy these places so they're not driving. The last thing I want to tell you about, and I'll take questions, Teresa, who's over here, she went over to one of the, when they set these up, they have multiple groups with pictures of what they're doing, and individuals can go talk to city staffers. So Diana and I and Teresa kind of split up and went to different people to ask questions. Teresa asked the very bright young man in the planning department, well, isn't all of this development going to cause, like over congestion on the roads? Well, we need to have light rail. And the man goes, oh, absolutely. Well, hovering behind him was an older gentleman who cuts in and goes, no, not light rail. We're going to use buses. We're going to use buses. Folks, we just spent millions and millions to build Nemo Parkway to Princess Anne so you have another way to get and move around the city besides 264. I commute to my work in downtown Norfolk taking that, which takes me off of 264 because I can get there. But as soon as you overdevelop all of that and flood it with residential and mixed use, I won't be able to do that anymore, which then becomes the justification for light rail down the center of Princess Anne, which was built with that in mind, and the Southeastern Expressway, a massively expensive green belt that we're going to build in the southern end of the city, parallel to 264, parallel to Indian River Road, and parallel to Princess Anne. So my point in all of this is, number one, I wanted you to be aware that this was going on. It's been going on since 2011. One of the members of this organization has submitted on Wednesday a Freedom of Information Act request to the city, requesting to know exactly how much we've already paid for this 2,200 acres of land we've already purchased to build this with, how much we paid the Urban Design Associates company and the 3 other companies to do public relations like the Miles Agency on this project out of your tax funds to date. Had it not been for me getting up late last Saturday and accidentally reading this little Princess Anne Independent News, I would have known nothing about this. Diana and I wouldn't have gone to the last public hearing. We wouldn't have been able to ask these questions, and we wouldn't have been able to come here today to tell you about it. Something this massive is sneaking under the radar, and it's a change to our culture and city of amazing proportion. And yet,
I wasn't able to get any answer on what it costs out there. They're like, oh, that's not my field. The money part I don't worry about. And I'm like, that's kind of, and I also, with all this crony capitalism and really immoral activity of not telling the public about such a massive thing. It makes me wonder, why did they not fix and maintain our drains? And I believe it was the mayor had told somebody, you know, why should we spend this much money on that area that only
Jim
brings
Wood.
in this much revenue? Maybe they're somewhere making plans for that area too.
Well, but obviously they were, but to Teresa's point, Councilman Jim Wood was in a working session, and he made an interesting comment. He was talking about the Windsor Woods, Princess Anne area, and they've already invested over $50 million in flood abatement in that area, and it's failing. And it's going to cost roughly another $60 million to get it up to a 10-year flooding level, also to repair and take care of what we've already built that we've been neglecting. And he was making the point that that investment by the taxpayers is greater than the total value of all the homes and land within those residential areas. And wouldn't the city be better off just writing a check to every homeowner, bulldozing down their house and putting a park in there, because it would cost less money, and just accept the fact that that area is going to flood?
I would contend they've got some little plans,
So,
pictures.
but the optics of that were bad, but from a pure business point of view, he was making a rational argument of saying, why would I spend $110 million to save a $50 million asset? That doesn't make any business sense. As a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, maybe we should just buy out the homeowners. Of course, what that fails to understand is those are neighborhoods and people's homes who've lived there and raised their children. And when you came to this city, we were a community for a lifetime. That was our slogan. So we're, here we are. So I submit that probably one of the reasons that we're getting a plan to deal with stormwater abatement for a 10-year event is that they're trying to keep bond capacity available for this ITA project that we have. My point, I'll take questions, is, folks, all of these are nice to have, wonderful, kayaking and bird walking and adventure ropes and, brand new environmental centers and blah, blah, blah. We don't need any of that. What we need is people's homes protected and the stormwater system we've already paid properly maintained, because that's the job of the city. But instead, all of our attention is off on this kind of stuff. And so I guess I would like to say, one, I wanted to make you aware of it, and two, I'm not sure what to do about it other than somehow we have to begin to get the details, get the information, and let our elected officials know we don't want to do it. While we seldom do it, we probably should pack that planning commission meeting and object to this. Even if a person walks up and says, my name is Bob Smith, I live in Windsor Oaks, and I'm opposed to this because I think it's the wrong priority for the city, and you sit down, and the next person walks up. That at least is something, but right now this is flying under the radar. Are there any questions? Yes?
What impact does this have on the agricultural reserve plan? Because Barbara Henley, that's her baby. So is this ITA a way of developing everything but still allowing those little pockets to remain intact?
So to Marlena's question, she's talking about the agricultural reserve program. Many, many years ago, our city decided that we would like to retain the rural character of our city below the green line, which is basically Indian River Road. And that idea, in order to do that, landowners have a right of personal property to develop their property within its current zoning. So some of those by right developments would have created the opportunity for people who own farms in the southern section of the city to sell those farms off, build residential or some kind of light retail. The city would have had to have been forced to build sewer systems and schools and fire stations in an area that doesn't have any of those things. They dig ditches to manage the water out in the country. So to avoid that expense, they offered to buy the land or the rights to develop the land for 20 or 30-year periods. And they paid those landowners millions of dollars to keep that land from being developed. Of course, the problem is that a lot of that land that we paid the millions of dollars for has now come out of the limitation. because the 25 or 30 years is over. So looking down the road, they're now no longer going to be required to be restricted, and that land's available under its current zoning. This includes rezoning the land to allow mixed-use urban development south of the Green Line. So these people who collected millions for putting their land in really took it off the market, got paid by the taxpayers, and after all the rest of the greenfield was infilled north of the Green Line, and we started the strategic growth areas, now they can turn around and open up the southern section of the city for residential development, keeping their view sheds with taxpayer-funded parks and dollars. And lo and behold, the Agricultural Reserve Program provided the ability for them to do that without having to pay the taxes on the land while they were waiting 20 or 30 years for the rest of the city to develop out. Bottom line, a lot of this land, as it comes off of the limitation, can be developed, but they're going to have to go back and ask for rezoning. This plan opens up the camel's nose under the tent to create the beginnings of that, and once you've set that precedent, how do you say no? Does that answer your question?
I think
Yes.
that also, I think this is going on all over the country because this older gentleman that I talked to, I brought up the terminology and everything, and I said, this sounds, you know, this is probably coming down out of the UN. And a lot of people look at Agenda 21 as conspiracy theorists and people out of their mind and tin hats and all this. But the simple fact is, he told me yes. I played the dumb blonde, you know, so he had no idea who I was, and I'm just asking these questions because I did recognize all the terminology. So through No Child Left Behind, with the SOLs and what our children are being forced with vertical farming and stuff like that, and in education, and the further away government is from the taxpayer, the less they understand our needs. These people that are telling us this stuff from the UN with all these agricultural production and all this stuff, they don't know that we have homes that are flooding. They are too far away from us.
So to Teresa's point, the head of neighborhood preservation, Barry Frankenfield, kicked off this meeting on Tuesday night. And he actually made a joke himself in his opening remarks that a lot of people have criticized me for hiring the Urban Design Associates to come up with a plan for the rural section of the city. Ha 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 ha. But I did that because they're really good designers. The Urban Land Institute was paid for with your tax money to come up with the plan to redevelop Pungo into an urban village. Your city government is staffed with people who went to college as professional engineers to become urban planners. The reason we're turning suburban Virginia Beach into urban jungle is that's what they were taught in college. Councilman Dyer was talking to Nora's question about taxes and could we lower taxes, and he was saying I need to grow business and grow this. It's a Ponzi scheme. We have a massive amount of unfunded liability for pensions for city workers. It's widening every day. It's up above $400 million right now, right? This unfunded liability that we owe requires the city to grow and add more residents to distribute the cost of the future tax increases to make up for the money they haven't been paying for this unfunded liability. It's a Ponzi scheme. So the reason that they keep, how many people are enough? 455,000 people, the most populated city in Virginia. But it's not enough because
Well, that young man said the more they pack into an area, the better they can be serviced.
Well, but the
That's
point,
what they think.
Trust us.
That's not
the
true.
point is, it's a Ponzi scheme because if you can cram more people in and they're paying that taxes, they think they're going to gain on it. Of course, we're going to have services to service those people. Key to all of this is high-income jobs. without those high-income jobs, you're actually creating a drain rather than an asset or a net gain.
How do you fund those high-income city jobs? City taxes. It never ends. It's
Right.
perpetual.
It's a machine that once you stop, it's musical chairs. If
Yes.
you don't stop the growth, then all the liabilities come through and the whole thing collapses in on itself. But that isn't why I was here. I want to go on forever on this. If you're not aware, you watching this on the tape, on the city's website, VB.gov, type in inter-facility traffic area. There's a little search thing on the top window. It'll give you a list of files. Click on the PDF for the summary plan, and there's a detailed plan that has the specifics in it, much longer than this. This organization, the Virginia Beach Taxpayer Alliance and the Tea Party are working on this initiative together. We're going to provide the results of the Freedom of Information Act and make available how much have we already spent on buying the land for this before anybody has actually voted on the Planning Commission to approve it and before it's ever gotten to City Council. Folks, City Council is your elected representative. This probably should have gone before them before they spent however many millions of dollars they've spent to purchase 2,200 acres of land for this plan in the southern section of our city. And what's the point of having strategic growth areas to focal and centralize the urban development along the 264 corridor if at the same time we're going to be growing and exploding residential development in the southern end of the city? They're antithetical. And so my credit goes to the Planning Commission woman, her name again in this article, here's her picture, Karen Beardsley, Kwasny, and she wrote a dissenting comment to this about the fact that what's not included is additional residential, which is antithetical to what we're trying to do. So with that, any other, yes?
Do we know, I assume at this juncture, we don't know who has been buying this land, like which department or who has authorized the purchase of all of
The
these?
city voted to put taxes on us to purchase open space, and the majority of this land has been purchased with open space funds. So City Council legally approved the taxes, which created the money to buy the land. Then the city staff is empowered to decide what land to buy to preserve open spaces. In the case of the North Landing Park, that actually is a legitimate function of Parks and Rec. I mean, that their job is to create parks and open spaces. And since a lot of that, it's 792 acres, but only 93 acres of that is developable because the rest is wetlands. That's appropriate that they do that, and they're just trying to say, since we bought that wetlands to preserve that open space, let's come up with some amenity for the citizens where they can take advantage and do biking and pathing. I don't think that's, that is what the Parks and Rec does. Yeah. What's missing in this is the City Council's job to prioritize where we're spending our money. And currently flooding is the top priority in our city. And as Councilman Dyer said before this tape, the other problem we have is aging infrastructure, aging schools. There are many, many higher priorities than all these wonderful nice-to-haves that are bundled together in this massive package. So to answer your question, in a way, City Council approved this by approving the ability and raising taxes to buy open space and then handing over the responsibility to make those decisions to the city staff who are not elected. Are there any other questions? Yes, Bud.
I think you just answered the question, but the initiative to do this has come from City Council. Therefore, our city manager can do all this, and we haven't known about it for some reason.
Well, they claim when I asked, Bud's question was, we haven't known about this. And when Diana and I were there, we asked them, and they said, oh, we've held 5 public hearings already, going back to 2005. And so we've had plenty of public hearings on this. But if you listen carefully to their presentation, in 2011, they rewrote the plan. So those public hearings that predate the rewriting of the plan are being counted as part of the public hearings for this. Barbara Henley attended the meeting that Diana and Teresa and I went